Hey guys, how's it going? Robert Warshak here, and in this video we're going to be going over the top 5/best decks to try to grind your ranks with or hit legend with this upcoming March season. We've played a lot in the past month and a half since the changes, and these are the kind of decks that have proven to be really powerful. They just pull off wins. They have a high win rate. They're fairly easy to navigate and play. They're not overly complicated. So with that, let's get into it. First deck we're going to talk about is the Odd Mage. I've also included the win rate at the top based on when I researched this, which was yesterday, and pulled it from Hearthstone replay. Granted, the win rates are going to fluctuate. Don't focus too much on the win. It's just 54% overall is pretty good for a deck. If we take a look at the left hand side, less than 10,000 dust. As we can see, it's not absolutely budget. Budget's less than 3,000 for me, but it's still fairly cheap in comparison to some other control decks. So what makes this Odd Mage so powerful? It's the fact that it has a lot of floating damage, and I may express this different than others, but floating damage means it doesn't necessarily have to have minions on the board to do damage that turn or during your opponent's turn. So if we have cards like Arcane Missiles, we've got cards like Explosive Runes, we have Cinderstorm, Jandalai, which pulls Rag, and we have Clockwork Automation Golem. These cards allow you to do a lot of damage on your turn without actually having to have a minion stick for a turn and attacking, which is where I think this deck really shines. Because if you're playing against decks like Warlock, Rogue, or Hunter, you're battling on the board a lot of those times, and a lot of those decks have a lot of field removal if you look at Warlock, but they don't have a lot of ways to stop or mitigate damage going to their face if it's not their turn, which a lot of decks don't. So this deck really shines at pumping out upwards of 10 damage just from your hand on your turn, plus they have to deal with the board. So weaknesses to this deck, I love playing against this deck with my Odd Warrior being up to tank up, spank up every turn. But besides that, Druid's fairly, in my opinion, if I'm playing a Tog Druid or something, this deck is normally not a bad matchup either, depending on how well they start. But again, this deck can start exceedingly fast. Firefly or Dire Maul on 1, Hero Power, and then another minion on 3 with a Kieran Torn to a secret, and to coin, Fungal. It's hard for any deck to deal with that. So the next deck we're going to take a look at, let's see if I have it all ready. Oof, look at that, 52.88 for the win rate of this Hunter deck. I think that's a really low. I'm not really sure why this deck has that win rate's lower. It may because it just has more games played, because this is one of the most popular, if not the most popular deck on ladder right now. It's the most budget version of any deck that I've seen recently. 3,100 dust is very cheap, and that's this is one of the most expensive ways to build the deck. And this deck just shreds. It's the most brought deck to this recent HTC Winter Championship, which I'm actually watching off on the side here right before I started recording this while putting all of the information together. So this deck is just crazy powerful, very budget friendly, and the way it works is it just curves out very well. I mean, every turn you're gonna be basically have something to do, and it's normally very powerful for that stage in the game. So turn 1, Dire Maul is very good. Spring Paw, not the greatest. Timberwolf, again, not the greatest, but Dire Maul, Spring Paw, and Tracking are great, followed up by Crackling Razor Maul and Scavenging Hyena. I mean, those are just two insane cards that if 1-drop and a 2-drop isn't dealt with, you're dealing upwards of anywhere between 4 to 8 damage on turn 2 to 3. From there, Animal Companion, Master's Call, which is one of the cards that actually makes this deck function as good or as well as it does, is because Master's Call is basically a 3 mana draw 3, and on top of that, if you've used your Dire Frenzy earlier in the game to be able to buff, a Crackling Razor Maul, a Tundra Rhino, a Savannah Highmane, Scavenging Hyena, a Huffer, any of these cards, being able to draw them with Master's Call and then play a 3 mana 4, a 3, what is it? A 3 mana 7/5 is what a Huffer would be. And it has charge, and you get 3 of them with the Dire Frenzy. I mean, that's just disgusting. I mean, obviously there's plenty of other great minions to pick, but Huffer seems to be the one that always wrecks me the most. I mean, Savannah Highmane's wonderful too. So the deck just does so well in the early game. But yeah, really solid and super good deck. So this next deck we're going to take a look at is going to be Dexter's Wall Priest. This deck just blew up, guys. I mean, I'm talking, this deck did not exist before Dexter started playing it, hit like top 10 legend with it or something crazy like that, and then posted his guide on Reddit. I mean, this deck spread like wildfire. So this actually, the reason I'm saying top 5 decks and not top 6 is because I wanted to include the Cloning Gallery right after this, but Cloning Gallery is slowly being replaced by this deck, and both of them have their pros and cons. This one seemingly just like it just gets there, and you look at the deck and you're like, well, Rob, how does it win? It doesn't run Malagos or Velen or Mind Blast. Where are the big thick resurrect minions? And the key is, guys, it runs the Topsy-Turvy, Inner Fire, Divine Spirit. And basically being able to Divine Spirit your Enforcer or a Lich King or a Grizzly and doubling its, HP twice, most of the time 3 times. I don't even understand how. These priests, they'll Divine Spirit a card 4 times. I was playing Control Warrior. I was at 80 health and they hit me for like 120 something. I'm like, what in tarnation? The key is to just basically have one of your big HP minions stick onto the board for 1 turn. From there, you Divine Spirit it, you Topsy-Turvy or Inner Fire. And the reason you run 1 Topsy-Turvy and 1 Inner Fire is because if your opponent runs Stalking Geist, you lose your Inner Fire, but you keep your Topsy-Turvy. So you still have an option when it comes to someone playing Stalking Geist against you. You'd be like, well, Rob, I can't get a minion to stick. Well, not a problem, guys. You run Shadow Madness too. So if your opponent's a Warlock and they run Void Daddy, you take their Void Daddy and you kill them with their own Void Daddy. And you're like, well, Rob, they have 2 Void Daddies. I can't get rid of 2 Void Daddies. I only run 1 Shadow Menace. Not a problem, guys. You run Mass Dispel. And when you run Mass Dispel, you don't give a shit how many taunts your opponent has or what's in the way. You just Mass Dispel that crap, get rid of that taunt, and smack them in the face. So, this deck just wins. And it's crazy. It's the most annoying deck to play against because you think you're safe at 30 plus health or even 80 plus health, and all of a sudden they hit you with a 104 fucking Lich King, and you're just like, yeet. It's awesome that Dexter made this deck popular, but Dexter, holy crap, is this deck annoying, my dude. This deck is so annoying, man. Oh my goodness. All right, so the next deck we're gonna cover real quick is just going to be the Cloning Gallery Priest. The reason I didn't want to make it you know what I mean? It's just like Wall Priest and Cloning Gallery function very similar. They kill your opponent in 1 turn. They run kind of like a similar package minus some of the minions. This deck has been around for a little bit, guys. Hopefully I know you've seen it, and hopefully you haven't played against it recently. It's as annoying as the Wall Priest. Between Malagos and Velen and the ability to go, coin, Cloning Gallery, or what the case may be. In this particular version, I don't run Gargoyle, guys, and I don't run Lyra, and that's the reason why you don't see Lyra Gargoyles, just because I found this version works best for me. Granted, you don't have to worry about 1 or 2 cards. You just play the deck how you see fit. I mean, Cloning Gallery Priest is Cloning Gallery Priest, regardless of plus or minus 2. But this deck wins through using Mind Blast and Holy Smites, guys, in combination with your not Lich King, but your Malagos and your Prophet Velens to be able to do, upwards of like 20, 30, 40 damage per Mind Blast for most of the time 1 to 0 mana. So it's just insane damage that you can do in the air, floating damage. And it's a fun deck, yes, for the person playing the deck, and it's not so fun the person on the reciprocating end getting wrecked. The next deck we're going to take a look at is going to be the Even Warlock. This is, again, probably one of the most popular Warlocks, if not the most popular Warlocks. Granted, there are some cubes running out there, so there's some control locks, and there is some zoo. But most of the time when I'm mulliganing, trying to figure out what kind of Warlock it is most of the time Even Warlock. And this deck functions like it always has. The ability to tap for 1 mana is insane. I mean, that's just craziness. From there, its early game consists of playing an 8/8 on turn 3, Twilight Drake on turn 4. I mean, they just play, this deck, it just revolves around playing absolutely huge statted minions for that low cost of roughly 3 to 5 mana. Granted, again, I know the rotation is going to happen not relatively soon, but we still have at least a month-ish of the meta that we're seeing now, so I figured this video will still be good for roughly a month. As for its good and bad matchups, I mean, playing a 3 mana 8/8 or a 4 mana 8/8 is good against almost every deck ever. So this deck can just run away with games regardless of like if it's actually a good or a bad matchup if you just draw correctly, but that kind of goes for any deck. As for its bad matchups, you know, I kind of look towards like Hunter, Odd Rogue, decks that are able to do a large quantity of damage and are very, very aggressive in the early game, just because this deck uses a lot of its health to tap to be able to draw cards. Which is why you run, like, you know, the Hooked Reaver, because when you're at 15 or less health, it's a 4-mana 7/7 with Taunt. But the problem with that is sometimes they can just File Spine Slayer it or silence it, and then they don't really have to get through the Taunt. But it does have a good amount of healing with, like, Shroom Brewer and the Spellstone and the Plated Beetles and the Blood Reaver Gul'dans and the ability to Sun Fury Protector to make more taunts. So this deck does have resources and utilities to be able to put taunts in the way. So regardless of your health, you have a wall. But it's still, you know, Hunter and Mage, they have a lot of floating damage. They don't need to make it to your face. They can just deal damage right over the minions regardless if they have taunt. So its weakness would be those types of decks. All right, and our last deck that we're going to be covering is going to be the Odd Paladin. This deck just seemingly doesn't die. It loses its level up, but it's still pumping. It just changed level up with Frostwolf Warlord, so now we don't have to worry about a field full of 3/3s. We just got to worry about a 5-mana 10/10 if they have a 6 minion board on turn 4 or 5 when they play it, whether or not they coin it out or not, which isn't that hard for this deck considering they have the ability to summon tons of minions very quickly at that low cost of 2 mana for 2 dudes, or 1 mana for most of the time 2 dudes too. It depends how frisky they're feeling. So what makes this deck so powerful is the fact that it runs so many little minions. They throw up on the board. If you don't deal with the little minions, they buff them with Raid Leader, Stormwind Champion, and Identified Maul, and Fungal Mancer. And if they're not buffing their minions, they're going ahead and they're using their minions to buff other minions like Frostwolf Warlord. So they have a lot of minions out. He gets stronger. And if you happen to clear the board and they have no cards in their hand, most assuredly they're going to go ahead and top deck Divine Favor, which says, you know, if your opponent's good and they have like 8 cards in their hand, well, so do you now too for that low cost of 3 mana. So the ability for this deck to keep the ball rolling, whether you want to run 1 Divine Favor or 2 Divine Favors, that's fine. The deck's gonna function, you know, regardless. It's just a good deck. I mean, it's very cheap too. I mean, 5,100 dust is not that expensive considering you do have Baku and Leroy in the deck. Baku's a necessary card, and it also fits in a shit ton of other decks. And then Leroy again is a part of the classic set. So 3,200 dust is just tied in those 2 cards. One of them works well with a whole bunch of other decks, and so does Leroy. So you can't really go wrong crafting this deck. Not that I want you guys to craft this deck because it's kind of annoying to play against, but if you're looking to win, looking to have a cheap deck for at least the next month until the rotation occurs, this is a really good pick. Plus it's actually not that hard of a deck to play. It's very popular. So with that, if I happen to leave anything out, let me know, guys. I know I really only wanted to cover like 5 of the most popular best decks that I've seen. So if you come at me like, hey Rob, I saw this crazy mech hunter hybrid mid-range / control, you know, floating air damage death rattle hunter deck, it was insane. No. So with that, thank you guys for watching. I'd love to hear your comments in the section below. As always, I'm Robert Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.